Okay. Good evening. Nice. Thanks everybody for making it out. My name is Stoney Samso. I am the executive director and co-founder with Open Air. We are the organization that is working collaboratively with Explore the Arts to have Linnea and a number of other artists in residence that we've had here. And it's an intimate group. It seems like you've all met Linnea, and so that's so wonderful that you folded her into your community. I love that. Thank you for making her feel welcome and creating alongside her. It's really a privilege to do this work, and it's been such a pleasure to do it with Barbara, her inspiring space down here. We love working in Hamilton. We work collaboratively with lots of different organizations in Western Montana. A lot of, probably about half of them are in the Missoula Valley area, and then we're up in the Flathead, and over in Butte and Phillipsburg and a number of other places. This is our last artist presentation for the year, but we've had 27 artists in residence, long-term artists in residence this year. And maybe, as you know, you've talked to Linnea and got a sense maybe of what a residency is, but for those who haven't, a residency program provides time and space for an artist to get curious, and because ours is place-based, it's also about kind of learning where they are, often transplanted from some other place to here. And I'm in Hamilton. What does this mean? And Linnea, I love how diligently she has just dove into asking that question and being really curious about her time here. And so I'm really excited to hear her share today. Our work is made possible from individual donor supports. We also received grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Beck Family, the Laura Barrett Family Foundation Fund, and the Payne family. So we're grateful for all of their generous support making this happen. One of the things we really care about with creative practices is not only the things that come out of it, these beautiful paintings and sculptures and all these things, but the process itself we really value. We think it's good for ourselves, good for our communities, and so we really try and invest in that and helping to support workshops and free programming, and also to support the artist time through bringing them a stipend at the end of their residency. So it's something we're really proud to do. I think that's enough from me. Thanks for being here. And I'm going to turn it over. Barbara, do you have any notes? You have such an intimate crowd. Everybody knows you so well. But is there anything you'd like to share with the group?
We always enjoy having the artists in residence and being part of that program, because they all have different art journeys, art forms, and they get to learn about our community and what we do, and we get to learn about them. So we really appreciate when people come and listen to their story, because it's always far more interesting than you ever dreamed. You just don't know people's whole story, and so enjoy, and thank you for coming.
I'm going to invite Kelly up, our program coordinator, to introduce Linnea more formally, and then we'll turn it over to the lady of the hour.
So I've got Linnea's bio here that I'm going to share with you all. So Linnea Fitterer is from southern Minnesota, where she first learned values of loyalty, observation, and independence. Growing up on a vast prairie, her roots encouraged exploration and creativity. Fitterer studied art history at Minnesota State University Moorhead. There, she expanded her understanding of the role of art and artists in society. Her undergraduate thesis work, titled Curating as an Artistic Practice, argued the responsibility of art administrators requires much creative vision and technique as the art and artists they support. She completed her graduate studies at the University of Indianapolis in social practice art. Through the program, she honed in on the values of human scale and engagement, and further investigated dialogue as an art form. These strategies inspired her podcast project, Arranged Encounters. Fitterer is an artist, administrator, and educator who provides leadership in program management, socially engaged art, and creative placemaking, with a devotion to ethical community practice, industry safety, and cross-sector collaboration. She currently lives and works in the Greater Cincinnati, Ohio region, where she is the director of the Office of Engagement and Adjunct professor at Art Academy of Cincinnati. So welcome, Linnea.
Gee, you've done a lot.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. Good evening. I really appreciate you taking time out of your evening to join us tonight. So glad it didn't dump down snow like I thought it would. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to Open Air. Thank you to Barbara and Explore the Arts for coordinating this opportunity for us to be together. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to take a photo of you all as my audience. You'll be able to explore my artwork a little bit more, but I've been taking Polaroid photos as sort of journal entry alongside of my work. So just one moment, if you don't mind.
What kind of expression would you like?
Whatever you want. You can do whatever you'd like. Whatever you want to bring to the experience.
I guess you're getting even.
Yes.
Yeah. We're always taking your picture.
Oh my gosh.
Awesome. All right. So many folks in the room know that I'm a teacher, so I love to provide an outline for my audiences. And so here's the bullet points of what I'm gonna talk about tonight in terms of my pathway to an artistic career, administration of art as my foundation, topics of my interdisciplinary practice around ignoring rules, safety, and data. I'm going to talk more about the artwork that you see in front of you, and then we'll close it out with some questions. I plan to sort of hit on the greatest hits, but if you have questions in the process of the presentation, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or blurt them out. Yeah, that's kind of how we roll here, a little casual, which I really appreciate. So to start, anyone can love the mountains, but it takes soul to love the prairie by Willa Cather, American author. So I came upon this quote when I was preparing for our data workshop last week, and I don't mean to offend all the mountain lovers in the room. By any means, they're stunning. But this quote really stuck with me. It was in a Montana magazine, first of all, about Lewis and Clark's journey. So that makes sense. But I couldn't resist including it because I miss home. And I also thought that it was applicable because my trajectory in the arts begins at home. So I was born and raised, as Kelly mentioned, in southern Minnesota, the place where that helped me form values of observation, loyalty, and independence. As a child, I was deeply interested in way too many hobbies and began to develop a mindset of, if I wasn't a superstar at something right away, I changed my mind and moved on. Drove my parents crazy. For example, here, I played hockey in middle school, and then when I got to high school, I quit the team and joined the cheer squad, where I cheered for boys and girls hockey before cheering for the football team. So in my teenage years, my world was really centered on performing successfully as an athlete. That was my focus. I loved cheering because it was direct community engagement. We were a team supporting a team and communicating to the fans with optimism, fun, and spirit. Back then, I took myself too seriously as a track and field athlete as well. This largely individual sport allowed me to focus on the perfection of my physical presence and movement throughout space. Without having an awareness or vocabulary for it at the time, of course, I was multidisciplinary. I never pigeonholed myself, and by nature, I just have a very strong will to bring my hopes and dreams to life. I'm still figuring out where that comes from, but it's true. I feel strongly that I'm a successful creative in my pursuits because of the foundation of being an athlete. I wouldn't have the applied values of discipline, accountability, or teamwork and dedication without these experiences. However, I never lost my desire to have multiple interests, and after graduating high school, I decided to attend college for art. Studying art was the most sustainable pathway for me in college, which also made my mother cringe, because it provided me a balance of my passion for bringing a vision into real space. But I didn't know really tangibly, I'm not from a family of artists, what I was going to do with my art degree, hence scared mother. But all I know is I was going to do it, and I was going to do it really well. I dove headfirst into drawing connections from my ideas to those of artists that I admired and used many research opportunities to claim the position of artists as global change makers, revolutionizing industries. In 2014, I graduated from Minnesota State University Moorhead with my degree in art history. And through that process of completing my degree, I was also working at the Plains Art Museum in Fargo, North Dakota. A variety of roles. I was interning everywhere I could, and was also working visitor services. So I was meeting lots of people coming into the space. And I learned quickly about the administration of art. It's not something that I really studied in school, in the intro 101 art history courses, but the roles of curators, art educators, researchers, collectors, and more, I found to be just as creative as the artwork that they supported. Following the completion of my time in Fargo Moorhead, I was advised not to go straight into grad school. I have a great mentor in my life from MSUM, and while she knew that I could continue in higher education, she recognized and supported my pathway through arts administration. At this time, I was getting pretty turned off to the ways in which museums, particularly the Plains Art Museum, kind of closed off their spaces to communities, making the artwork inaccessible to folks. And programming wasn't really scheduled in a way that folks could enjoy the artwork. So through this realization, and a move to Cincinnati, Ohio, I began working in public art for a nonprofit organization that supported and trains youth and emerging artists to create all the public works around the city. Through that experience, I worked with dozens of incredible artists, established designers, architects, city officials, and brought hundreds of works to life. I was in this position for about 7 years, and this photo of me in the studio is from 2015, one of my first high-profile projects with notable designer and painter Jimmy Jones in Cincinnati. And this is the mural that we created together for the community of Evanston in Cincinnati. And just over about 2 years of doing this work, working with artists and neighborhoods to use public art as collaboration, I realized that I cared more about people in the process of making art than the outcome. So don't get me wrong, the outcome is very important, of course. But through this experience, it blossomed the connection of how people can tell their stories, display their histories, and really be seen through public art. And so I quickly found myself in a position of realizing that I didn't really know how to work with the general public with my art history degree, go figure. And I desired for authenticity in the work that I was producing, right? So folks that I was seeing every day, our neighbors, could be seen in the public art. So in 2017, I enrolled in the University of Indianapolis' master's program. I was part of the first cohort of social practice art degree and focused on creative placemaking. This is a definition that I like to share about social practice art as a medium that focuses on engagement through human interaction and social discourse. The discipline values the process of art over the finished product or object. And this is by Pablo Helguera. There's a beautiful handbook that he's written on the education of socially engaged art. Another definition of social practice art from Harold Fletcher is essentially the exact opposite of a studio practice. So I like sharing that with my students who are in studio practices when they learn about socially engaged art, because it really helps flip their mindset of what is possible with the discipline. While I was in grad school, here's some images of my work. I learned the importance of place. I was really able to focus on what it meant to be in a place, be influenced by it, navigate it, and make change in a place. Also vice versa. How does place influence us as people? I made projects like the ones you see here to call attention to places that were unmarked but important to communities, and observed patterns of how residents use places in their neighborhood in order to promote opportunities for artistic interventions that helped them on a daily basis. I used my interest in photography and family legacy of quilting to communicate stories about people, place, and grief. This is an image of me and my first quilt project on display at the retrospective of my graduate studies in 2018. I must distinguish myself as a self-taught quilter. And I really do my best to get away with all the technicalities of quilting. I'm a spontaneous art maker. So all the nitty-gritty stuff about quilting kind of bores me, but I love the practice. I was too stubborn as a child and impatient to ever learn from the women in my family who were masters of making quilts, embroidering napkins, and beautifying their homes with wares to also create family heirlooms for their loved ones. And so out of respect for those beautiful women, I pay homage to them conceptually and not within my technique because they would not approve. Once I graduated with my master's, I continued working in public art for a few more years before I moved into roles in higher education full-time. I'm currently the director of the Office of Engagement and adjunct professor of social practice art at the Art Academy of Cincinnati. And within the Office of Engagement, my team and I oversee all of the youth and community program for the college. I have a few brochures in the front if you're interested. I also teach undergraduate and graduate students about the practices of socially engaged art to interject into their own practices, their classrooms, and more. After a few years of teaching, when I first started and continuing to facilitate community programs, I was getting this bubbling feeling of hypocrisy for not having my own established studio practice. So after a few more years of being a coward, I built up the nerve to invest in my own studio practice and launched it formally with a body of work that is still a work in progress to this day. And it's about the intersection of industry safety and fine art. So this practice, or this body of work, connects back to public art. When I was working in that role, I was in charge of making sure that the kids and the artists were safe on the scaffolding, working in roadways, etc. And so being OSHA certified, I wrote the manuals, I did all the training, and really had to be the disciplinarian when it came to that kind of stuff. And so being separate from that role for a while, I realized that there's a lot of content to work with, and I was really interested in that. And it helps not having that responsibility anymore. So finding these intersections and wanting to have conversations with this artwork really about what it means to be publicly safe, especially for women, the falsehoods of objects like vests and safety cones in actually protecting us, and more. So here's a couple examples. I made a bikini out of a safety vest, as you can see, and I used a hard hat as a Jell-O mold. So I want this work to be really fun and joyful. That's a huge objective in my studio practice, because work within the 9 to 5, especially with students, can get really heavy sometimes. And so it's really important to me to insert that fun and joy in what I can control. Here's a couple more examples. I decorated a safety cone with disco tiles, and I'm using Dada practices, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the clipboard work. So yeah, still a work in progress. Another body of work that's connected, but of course separate, because as you know, I like to do a lot of things at the same time, is my investigations of Dadaism with contemporary materials. The Dada movement, as many of you also know because you've taken my workshop, was founded in 1918 by Hugo Ball in Switzerland as a response to the horrors of World War I. Dadaists were visual artists, writers, performers, whose work were often satirical and nonsensical in nature, using chaotic practices as a means of expression, which in prior movements in art history has never been seen before publicly. Dada is one of the movements that social practice art and community art practices can really draw strong ties to. I use Dada poetry instructions to facilitate community workshops and bring non-traditional art materials to an elevated artistic field. These are a couple images of past work at a teaching residency a conference, and then with my students that I've done these before. All right, so what am I doing here? Finally, we move all the way to the open air residency and my time here in Hamilton. This is my very first out-of-state residency, so it's been an amazing experience, and it has cracked my mind wide open to new ways of doing things and being a creative within my career, which I honestly would not have been able to do in my life back in Cincinnati. Using the practices of socially engaged art history, education, and my administrative backgrounds, as well as what I've invested in my studio practice, I developed this project, which it's a working title, but I'm calling the Portrait Quilt of Hamilton, Montana. This is a slide of my reference photos, and you can connect maybe some of them to the quilt in front of you when we have a chance to walk around. But my goal with this quilt is to be a portrait of Hamilton through my artistic and stranger eyes. There's also other elements of the Bitterroot region that you'll find. I'm most interested in depicting what I find special and unique about this place. So things that you may walk by every day, but seem very special to me. Also gestures of kindness. I'm really drawn to all the signage that you have in this region, and other histories. The quilt pattern specifically is a traditional and very timeless 9-patch design, which I was influenced to produce for this project, along with my painted depictions, when I found this quilt top from the Montana State Library archives. It is dated between 1885 and 1925 by Charlotte Margarita Golick Wendell. I just really loved that this piece had an artist and a date to it. So this framework really worked for me because I was able to use traditional quilting techniques and also have space to paint and draw depictions of Hamilton on it. The 9-patch color palette is also a very happy accident. You can see here the color connections to a mural in town just down on 2nd Street. And I just happened to bring these colors of cotton with me because I was drawn to them, I liked them, and I had them. And so I was like, oh, I'll bring them and work on some projects while I get the inspiration for my big project, right? And in my first couple of days of just walking around and observing Hamilton, I discovered this mural, of course, because I love public art, and realized instantly that these were my colors. Yeah, so this is where we're at today. I have 35 out of my 50 paintings, my goal. I've got some works in progress over in the studio if you're interested in looking, but here's what I have so far. I will be constructing the quilt fully back at home. My goal is to get as much painting and content while I'm here. I'm here until Monday. And the goal is that the quilt will, in its finished state, will be on display in the region in the spring. So I'll definitely let you guys know where that's at. But this is where I end. That's my journey so far. And I just want to thank you, provide my contact information if you're interested, and open it up for questions, or if you want to walk around and explore, please identify things or ask questions about what's in the quilt. I've also got some of my Polaroids in the front too. So thank you guys.